We have tonight. After slamming the Senate Majority Leader,
I think Mitch McConnell ought to tender his resignation.
Is the Bannon wing taking one on the chin? Is McConnell right about anti-establishment candidates? Or is the Judge Roy Moore report just fake news? Greens go zany over Zinke.
Really morally disgusting.
The Interior Secretary opens up about plans for public lands in a Fox News at Night exclusive. And remember that meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and the Russian lawyer? Catherine Herridge has brand new information about that lawyer and links to Fusion GPS, the firm with ties to Democrats. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. The Trump agenda hangs in the balance as GOP nominee Judge Roy Moore vows to stay in the Alabama Senate race tonight, while Senate Republicans call the allegations against him, quote, devastating, horrific, and deeply disturbing if true. The Christian conservative Republican candidate, a favorite of former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, but not President Trump necessarily, is the focus of a new report by the Washington Post. It claims that in the late 70s, the then 32-year-old attorney may have crossed the line with a 14-year-old girl. 3 other women interviewed by the Post said he also pursued them when they were in their teens and he was in his 30s. But they said he did not make unwanted sexual advances. The report hitting right around the same time that Senate Republicans revealed their tax plan with stark differences from the House side. Now it's up to both sides to bridge the divide while dealing with a controversy that could further erode the Republicans' razor-thin majority in the Senate. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry picks up the story from there. Hello, Ed.
See you, Shannon. Caught in the middle of all of this is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He's been warning Steve Bannon, he did it on this program a few nights ago, about anti-establishment Republicans like Roy Moore who can win GOP primaries that may lose the general election. But McConnell can't celebrate or feel vindicated right now. He has to deal with the practical reality that Judge Moore is facing a December 12th special election that Republicans must win, as Moore insists all of this is fake news. Lee Korfman claiming to the Washington Post that when she was 14, Moore, 32 at the time, took her to his home, took off her outer garments and touched her bra and panties, plus guided her hands over his pants. Moore tweeting tonight, fighting back. The Obama-Clinton machine's liberal media lapdogs just launched the most vicious and nasty round of attacks against me I've ever faced. We are in the midst of a spiritual battle, he says, with those who want to silence our message. He's vowing not to back down. The Washington Post insists that basically, when it came to Korfman, they reached out to her and they found 3 other women who accused Moore of pursuing them when they were between the ages of 16 and 18. That led several Republicans today to say if the allegations are true, Moore should step aside. But what's amazing is that John McCain tweeted that Moore should get out without waiting for any kind of investigation. Quote, the allegations against Roy Moore are deeply disturbing and disqualifying. He should immediately step aside and allow the people of Alabama to elect a candidate they can be proud of. Now, if Moore quits, his name would stay on the ballot for the early December special election to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' old seat, because the state law holds new ballots can't be reprinted within 76 days of an election. We're within that, of course. Some Republicans talking about recruiting Luther Strange, the current senator who's on his way out, who was backed by the president and Mitch McConnell, but lost to Moore in the primary with the backing of Steve Bannon, who just yesterday told Sean Hannity it's McConnell who should get out of the way, after McConnell predicted to Shannon that Bannon was stirring up trouble while refusing even to use his name.
Back in 2010 and 2012, the person you mentioned and his allies succeeded in nominating 5 candidates who all lost. So we succeeded in 2014 and 2016 in defeating sure losers in primaries, and we took the Senate.
I think Mitch McConnell ought to tender his resignation. What he ought to do is offer to resign as soon as taxes are done. We can't do it in the middle of taxes.
Here's the thing. You heard about taxes there. If Republicans end up losing this seat in December, Democrats get yet another vote in the Senate, and the chances of passing tax cuts, let alone repealing and replacing Obamacare, out the window, Shannon. This is a big deal.
It is. And when you talk about the trouble with the ballot and the name staying on and the inability in recruiting someone who lost in the primary, it reminds me a lot of that Alaska primary, the seat that Lisa Murkowski ended up winning because of all these last-minute ballot issues.
And you could do that with Luther Strange or another Republican potentially, and there are going to be lawsuits to try to get another name potentially on the ballot. But obviously, this thing could be tied up in courts. It could be something that's dragging on for a while.
Yeah, and this is about a month away. All right, Ed, great to see you.
A lot at stake.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
All right, Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs has been a staunch supporter of the Trump agenda. So does he think tax reform could be in jeopardy as Republicans try to hold on to a key Senate seat vacated when Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General? He joins us now live from Phoenix. Congressman, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Shannon. Good to be with you.
Okay, so we got the Senate side plan today. We already knew what we were working with in the House, and then we get this bombshell about a potential Senate candidate who, you know, that vote could be critical on the Senate side to getting something passed there. How worried are you about these scandals and distractions, potentially jettisoning tax reform, which you guys need to get done?
Well, you know, you've been watching, I've been watching, and I'm there, and I'm not sure that we're the best at being focused with distractions going on. And so this is a big distraction, one, but the second thing is, the good news is I see a lot of us moving in the same direction with the Senate, the House and the Senate. Now, there are differences, but I think we can get it done. And I think it behooves us to get this thing done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and a lot of voters who are waiting to see things get done. Obamacare repeal didn't happen. They want to see tax reform done. There have been a lot of promises by top leaders that this will get done by the end of the year. And as you said, though, there's still some criticism. And it's not necessarily, you knew the Democrats wouldn't like it. But even within the GOP, there are a lot of differences. Senator Jeff Flake had this to say. He says, I remain concerned over how the current tax reform proposals will grow the already staggering national debt by opting for short-term fixes while ignoring long-term problems for taxpayers and the economy. We must achieve real tax reform crafted in a fiscally responsible manner. We're hearing from a lot of folks who are fiscally conservative who say this thing doesn't look a whole lot like a Republican small government tax-cutting plan.
Well, I think it's because we've got so many moving parts in there. I think the main thing that the American people wanted was a reduction of the rates, and that's what we have. And the Senate really nailed it in their plan today in that top bracket, so everybody gets a rate reduction. But at the same time, we don't have this dynamic scoring, and you have to figure the dynamic scoring is going to really pump up the economy and bring in more revenue. That's the first side, but the other side is, let's just face it, we need to be cutting spending. You have to cut spending, and we just haven't seen that we have the will to do that.
Yeah,
which
where's
is
the appetite for that? Where's the appetite for that on the Hill by Republicans?
Yeah, I'm shocked myself being there new, you know, and there's a lot of us that want to make reductions, but the overall will doesn't seem to be there, and that's the demoralizing type of thing. But I do believe that the dynamic of scoring effect is going to be so big. If we move to the 4.6 as it's predicted in the next quarter, it'll be because of this tax reform. And I suspect that we're going to keep growing. And every 1 point of growth is $1 trillion more in the economy. That generates more federal tax revenue. But it does you no good if at some point you're unwilling to reduce the spending.
Yeah.
And so that's the push that I'm trying to make as well.
Okay, I want to ask you about something that was also really big on the trail, campaign trail last year, important to your state in Arizona, which is this issue of illegal immigration and how to handle young people who are here, the so-called dreamers. First of all, I want to play what Nancy Pelosi had to say about this, the House Minority Leader, and then a little bit from Speaker Ryan.
But I fully intend that we will not leave here without the DREAM Act passing, with a DACA fix.
Okay, that's her prediction. And the Huffington Post says this, that the House Speaker Paul Ryan, of course, Republican, has privately conceded to a group of House conservatives on Tuesday that he plans to include a legislative fix for undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as kids in a year-end spending deal. Where are you on DACA? And do you think that's what GOP voters who elected this president, gave you guys the House and the Senate, is that what they want to see?
I don't think that's what our voters want to see. I'm not for that. I think that we buy into the Democrats' talking points when we start talking about DACA, long before we talk about building the wall, and we facilitate actual building the wall, securing the border, removing the incentives to come here and stay here illegally. And I think if we don't do that, then you can't even have a reaction, because most of these people who want DACA, they don't just want DACA, they want a clean DREAM Act, which means they don't want border security, they don't want a border wall. And so this is just a mistake, in my opinion, to get ahead of the game, and the game should be building that wall and securing the border. Once you do that, no emotion will come into it, and you can have an objective discussion about what you do at that point.
Well, you know, it's something that voters probably elected and sent you there to do, and many others across this country, so they're watching. Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
Well, President Trump arriving on his fourth stop of his Asian journey tonight. He's heading to Vietnam. He's going to attend an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit focused on trade, but a possible meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin could grab all the headlines. A Russian official claims the two leaders will meet on the sidelines, but U.S. officials are downplaying expectations. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says they're still deciding whether the meeting will actually happen. Well, Hillary Clinton is pushing back against claims she and her campaign exerted too much power and control over the party during her failed run for president last year. Donna Brazile, former interim chair of the DNC, claims in her new book that the Clinton team essentially took over the national party and rigged the nomination process at the expense of her party rival, Senator Bernie Sanders. Clinton tells NBC's Late Night, quote, that just wasn't the case, and says she doesn't know what Brazile was referring to. 3 countries have ordered their citizens out of Lebanon amid skyrocketing tensions between the Saudi and Lebanese governments over Hezbollah. Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Saudi nationals visiting or living in Lebanon should leave the country as soon as possible. Kuwait and Bahrain also requested their citizens leave. Earlier this week, Saudi Arabia asserted that Lebanon has essentially declared war on the Saudis because of Iran-backed Hezbollah's aggression and influence in Lebanon's military and political spheres. Just ahead, deep down in the swamp, a new report tonight that the Russians were closer to the dossier and Democrats than previously thought. Catherine Herridge coming up on that. And the Guardian of Public Lands is under fire from the Greens. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke joins us live for an interview so rare, it's practically endangered.